bombs and rockets, making it amazingly versatile in the fighter-bomber role.
We had two 500-pound bombs, and then normally we carried a fragmentation bomb on the belly, 260-pound frag bomb, which was an anti-personnel bomb.
Carried a wide variety of bombs and what have you. We carried two 500-pound bombs. We carried napalm. We carried 1,000-pound straight GPs. We carried 1,000-pound. They were in a shell similar to a 50-gallon drum, just pure dynamite. They were concussion instruments because some of the areas that we were dive bombing in and against troops were steep enough that the concussion, the blast, would kill people. It just depended on what the particular ground support mission requested.
As the P-47's role as an escort fighter was eclipsed by the P-51, so grew its role as a ground attack weapon. 9th Air Force P-47s played a tremendously important role from D-Day through the end of the war, supporting the ground troops as they pushed forward into the Reich.
We were almost entirely there to support troops on the ground. In my case, we were in what we call 29th TAC. The 9th Air Force is organized into three tactical air forces, 9th, 19th, and 29th. And 9th was on the south end, 19th was in the middle, and 29th was on the north end of the U.S. forces as we were going across France and Germany. So we supported the troops that were in 9th Army.
From their aerial perches, Thunderbolt pilots searched out any targets of opportunity.
We would go out and they'd say armed reconnaissance. And what that meant essentially was if you see anything moving, go shoot, go hit it. Because by that time in the war, the Germans, there were no civilian vehicles moving in Germany. They were all related to the military in some way. Even the horse-drawn and all that was usually carrying ammunition or food or something for the troops. And anything from a single staff car to a convoy of trucks would be a target if it was moving and we were there.
Sometimes, while strafing one target, another presented itself.
I can recall a mission where we were strafing, there were about 4 or 5 large trucks. They weren't semis, they were big vans on a truck chassis, and just going down the road in convoy, and we were strafing those, and they were coming to an intersection, a 90-degree intersection in the road. And in one corner of that was a woods. And as my flight commander was pulling off the target, he just happened to look down the woods and said, "Hey, that woods is full of airplanes." So next time around, he made a pass on the woods, strafing. And we hadn't had a shot fired at us till then, and then the whole sky lit up. And he got 104 or 5 holes in the squadron commander's airplane in the process. Lost a cylinder off his engine, and lost his radio. I was flying his wing. He hollered at us, "Don't come in," and none of the rest of us did. So he's the only one that got hit. But he got it home with 104 holes in the airplane and 1 cylinder missing off the engine, and so on. And the next day they went back out and bombed the airfield itself and knocked it out.
Tanks were prime targets for the roving bands of Thunderbolt pilots. During the Battle of the Bulge, the P-47 squadrons helped blunt the German attack on those few days when the weather cleared enough to get planes aloft.
Our target ended up being a row of, I think it was 5, might have been 6 Tiger tanks that were parked in an open field. There was snow on the ground, so they were very visible, parked in an open field. And I think probably because of the fuel situation, the Germans had no fuel. They were out of fuel. And they had parked them there and lined them up and were using them as artillery. But those were our targets. And it's a kind of a story in my group, or in my squadron. I just saw the guy yesterday. Dropped a 500-pound bomb right down the open hatch of a Tiger tank. It just happened to go right in the hatch.
During the crossing of the line, the 9th Air Force's P-47s once more played a key role in the overall operation. thousands of Allied aircraft poured over the Reich's western frontier, suppressing flak batteries, wiping out tanks, trucks, and infantry units with ghastly effectiveness. Yet the Germans, with all their proficiency, were able to strike back with desperate intensity.
We went up there with bombs and guns and waited to be hollered at for a target, or something like that. We watched the paratroopers go in, and the Germans actually, when the paratroopers went across, I don't know how high they were, but I would guess 5,000 or 6,000 feet. The Germans actually lowered the 88s, the anti-aircraft 88s, and fired so that the shells broke amongst the parachutes. After the guys were out of the airplane, their chutes were open. And it was pretty bad. I mean, you could just see that. And the gliders came in, they were getting hit too. But, and while we were doing that, waiting for a target to be called, we had a squadron of British Lancasters come overhead and open their bomb bay doors and start dropping bombs just almost through our formation. There was a lot going on. It wasn't all coordinated as well as it could have been. Nobody got hit or hurt, so we were okay.
By war's end, Thunderbolt units had destroyed more targets than any other British or American fighter bomber. Tens of thousands of trucks, hundreds of tanks, thousands of aircraft, troops, and tons of supplies went up in flames as a result of marauding P-47 attacks. No other aircraft packed as devastating a punch, and nothing in the air could take the amount of ground fire and get its pilot home as could the beloved P-47 Thunderbolt. When the world celebrated VE Day, the JUG pilots in the 8th, 12th, 15th, and 9th Air Forces could look back with pride on their accomplishments, knowing that they played a significant role in defeating the Nazi war machine. While the P-47 played an integral role in the war in Europe, Thunderbolts had less success in the Pacific theater until very late in the war. The major thing that stymied the 47's operational use against the Japanese was its massive fuel consumption.
What really shook us up when we were getting P-47s in New Guinea was the way that thing consumed gasoline. Fuel consumption was enormous, compared to a P-40.
The P-47 represented a lot of challenges to the guys in the 5th Air Force, one of which was the fact that it consumed fuel at such a rapid rate. But when the 348th Fighter Group arrived in the Southwest Pacific, its commanding officer, Neil Kirby, became one of the advocates for the Thunderbolt. And he went all over to different fighter units in the 5th Air Force to try to convince, he was almost evangelical about it, to try to convince the other fighter leaders that this was a terrific aircraft type. He was met by stiff resistance, but eventually there were several Thunderbolt groups that were deployed into the Southwest Pacific, and they gradually figured out ways to work around the fuel consumption issues.
Half a world away, Claire Chennault's 14th Air Force in China was offered the P-47. Chennault, with his crippling fuel shortage, was not impressed.
They took the 47, they ferried them across to China. And when Chennault found out the kind of fuel consumption the 47 had, he kicked them out of there in one big hurry. Just couldn't afford that kind of a drain on his limited fuel supplies.
Though the P-47 never saw widespread use